Recording in progress.
Welcome to the City Council special meeting this Tuesday evening, January 16th. I now call this meeting to order. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
With pleasure, Mayor. Councilmember Hedges.
Here.
Councilmember Lorraine.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Newsom.
Here.
Mayor Diaz-Nash.
Here.
Thank you.
At this time, I will ask our Deputy City Clerk or City Clerk if any notifications or requests for virtual meeting participation have been received from any members of the council due to just cause or emergency circumstances.
No, we do not have any requests for just cause or emergency circumstances.
Thank you very much. We are excited to be here in person with options for those who choose not to be in person to participate virtually. There are several ways to participate. For those attending in person, please complete a yellow request to speak slip and hand it to the clerk. If participating remotely, use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. You will be called on at the appropriate time. If calling in via phone, press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press *6 to unmute. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for each specific item. We will begin this special meeting with our first two items, which will both be closed session items on conference with legal counsel, existing litigation. Before we move into closed session, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on these items?
No, Madam Mayor, we have no public comment.
All right, then we will move into closed session. All right, welcome back, everyone. We will now move into the third item on the agenda, which will be a sustainable building strategy project update by Andrea Chow, our sustainability analyst. Thank you, Andrea.
All right. Good evening. My name is Andrea Chow. I'm the sustainability analyst with the City of San Mateo. And tonight our presentation will focus on our sustainable building strategy and our effort to decarbonize existing buildings. I'd like to introduce our consultant, Rincon Consultants. This is Ryan Gardner. He's going to take on the majority of tonight's presentation. And I will briefly show you what's coming up next in our presentation, which starts with a project overview, talking through the local policy here in San Mateo and in our region. We're going to spend a good amount of time talking about the costs associated with building electrification and go into the community feedback that we've received thus far in the process. This is an ongoing project, so more community engagement is planned for throughout the process. And then finally, we'll go into the building decarbonization policy options to consider for existing buildings. And this is really where I want council feedback. And our kind of question to you all is, what policy options should the project team include in continued project outreach and continued analysis for decarbonizing existing buildings? So you see them on the slide right now, but we have a lot to go through to educate and inform. So I will now hand it over to Ryan to dive into our project overview.
Thank you. So I'll start off with a little bit of a project overview and just some background information before we get into the cost analysis, the community feedback so far, and then the policies that we are thinking about so far. So the sustainable building strategy goals, the reason that we're putting this together is to develop an actionable roadmap with concrete steps for the city of San Mateo to electrify their buildings and align with their climate action goals. We want to make sure that we're identifying approaches to align with those goals, but also balance costs and other impacts to make them feasible. And we want to leverage the best available science and the best data to inform this approach. And we want to listen to the community throughout the process. So we're already through phase 1 of that, and we'll be entering into phase 2 throughout the year. So just, the basics on what building electrification is and how do we electrify buildings. Really what we're talking about is replacing gas appliances with electric ones in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So while gas has kind of a standard greenhouse gas emission factor, and it will always have that, electricity emissions are going to go to 0 by 2045 due to SB 100, the state renewable portfolio standard. And we already have essentially carbon-free electricity through Peninsula Clean Energy. So what we're talking about is replacing items like space heating and cooling, water heating, cooking, and clothes drying with electric alternatives. And really we're talking about using heat pumps, which are 400% efficient, to replace both the space heating and cooling and water heating. On cooking, it could be kind of any electric alternative, but induction is really the most efficient and the most pleasant to cook on. And then clothes drying could be a resistance electric heater or a heat pump. On the benefit side, besides greenhouse gas emissions, this is one of the largest areas for greenhouse gas emissions reduction potential in the city and is the largest reduction called out in the Climate Action Plan. It also is an opportunity to improve community health. Combusting natural gas inside your home has been proven to increase air quality emissions like NOx and benzene, and those can have impacts on human health, especially childhood asthma and things like that. Energy affordability, we'll get into this a little bit, but switching to all electric appliances today, the average homeowner on PCE rates would see a savings, and gas rates are expected to more than double over time as efficiency reduces the amount of therms we buy, but we have the same amount of infrastructure to upkeep. On the resilience and safety side, we have the ability to decrease fire and carbon monoxide risk by eliminating gas, and also increasing resilience by looking at solar and battery, which can help homes run normally on electric. And then finally, equity benefits. This isn't a given, but if we do this the right way, there's a lot of money out there right now that we can use to invest in buildings that just haven't been invested in our low-income communities, and to help deal with some of the energy inequity where low-income homeowners tend to spend a lot more, higher percentage of their take-home income on energy bills. Just a little bit of local policy context. The city has done quite a bit on building electrification already. Like I said, it's one of the largest items in your climate action plan, calling for the electrification of new and existing buildings over time. There's the new building electrification ordinance, electric readiness and appliance replacement requirements for specific home remodels. And then coming down the line is the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's zero NOx space and water heating requirements. And this is going to begin requiring setting a zero NOx threshold for water heating in 2027 and then space heating in 2029, where you'll no longer be able to buy appliances that emit NOx emissions at Home Depot or anywhere, any store online. And that is every gas burning appliance. Collectively, those two appliances make up around 90% of the gas used in homes. So those are kind of the major consumers of natural gas. So I'm going to get into building electrification costs a little bit. And I just wanted to preface this section. We're going to talk a lot about individual appliances and the cost differences between gas and electric, but really the high-level cost reason why we focus on building electrification is it's been shown to be the most cost-effective way to decarbonize buildings. And we need to decarbonize buildings eventually to reach our carbon neutrality goals that have been set by the state and by the city. So that's really why building electrification is the focus here. But that being said, replacing gas equipment in existing buildings with electric equipment does cost more upfront. So in this chart, we see the gray line is the gas equivalent cost. And a note for the space heating and cooling, that top bar, that's the cost of both a furnace and an air conditioner, because a heat pump provides both of those services. And we'll break those apart in the slide after this. But the dark blue line is the cost to install the electric alternative. In this case, like I said, heat pumps, induction stove, and a regular resistance dryer. So there is an incremental cost without any incentives. But with the current incentives available through the federal government, through the Inflation Reduction Act, local and state rebates from BayREN and Peninsula Clean Energy and others, water heating, switching to a heat pump hot water heater is essentially free. No upfront costs at all after all rebates are taken into account. So there's about $7,500 per household available to electrify water heating. So that at time of replacement would be a savings compared to replacing with gas of about $2,800. Space heating without cooling, that's where we see a little bit of an incremental cost, even with rebates. But once we look at space heating and cooling, we see incremental savings compared to replacing a furnace and an air conditioner. On the clothes drying and cooking side, there's not a lot of rebates available for those. So making that upgrade, if you do need to run new conduit or a new circuit, is going to have that cost increase. And then a panel upgrade, which could be needed depending on your home setup and your current panel, could cost up to like around $2,000 after the rebate that's available. And I didn't mention this, but all of these costs for the electric side, they include all of the work that would be necessary. So running a new 220 line, adding a new breaker, all of that work is included in these costs. The panel upgrade is broken out and can be anywhere around like $4,000, $3,700 for a panel. if it's needed, which it's not always. So that's the upfront costs. The next critical question is, what are our energy bills going to do after we electrify? This data is provided by Peninsula Clean Energy. They did an analysis using their specific customer rates and their customer usage. And this ends up being a really challenging calculation because electricity costs different amounts at different parts of the day. So depending on when things are operating, you can get really different results. So they used actual customer aggregated data to come up with that analysis. When we did that, we see about a $32 a month savings on average with standard electric appliances and a $40 a month savings when we use higher efficiency. What's neat is that you also see about a 57-60% decrease in total building energy. So we're using just way less energy overall, and about a 40-45% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions after electrification. One really important takeaway here is that if you are electrifying your building, you need to switch to the all-electric rate, which you can do once you have an EV or a heat pump hot water heater or heat pump HVAC. That's going to provide those savings. If you don't do that, you could see your bill go up. So that's one thing we want people to be well aware of, because the rate does make a big difference. I'm going to talk a little bit about multifamily and commercial. So everything I talked about was just single family. On the multifamily and commercial side, we have less good data here. The building systems in single family and even in like small multifamily like duplexes and triplexes are all very similar. It's a water heater, it's HVAC, they're all pretty much the same across the board. Once you get into larger commercial buildings, there's a lot more variability in how those buildings are set up. They also tend to be run more inefficiently. Larger systems, they haven't been retrofit in a long time. That being said, within those buildings, there are a couple of places where it looks like there's really good opportunities that we know are cost effective. And one of those is the rooftop package units that provide both heating and cooling. And today, those use natural gas for heat and usually a heat pump for cooling. So they're already wired to accept a heat pump, they already have panel capacity, and the cost difference to go to just a full heat pump for both heating and cooling is negligible. So you see the kind of comparison here in this slide that it's hundreds of dollars difference out of tens of thousands of dollars for those units. So this represents a really good opportunity in the commercial and large multifamily space to make a dent in our gas use. So next, I will go through some of the initial community feedback that we've received. We've been doing outreach for the last handful of months. We attended the Sustainability Infrastructure Commission meeting in September, and there was over 120 written comments and 24 verbal comments. There were 5 general plan town halls where Andrea also did some outreach on this project and talked to folks. We went to Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force meeting in September and got feedback from them. And then we've done an online survey through December and January that has garnered, I think, 293 responses last time when we pulled this data. And of that, some of the top concerns were impacts to the grid and power outages / resilience. So how are we going to operate our buildings if the power goes out? And cost was clearly a big concern. But on the value side, also an acknowledgement that climate change is a pressing issue for the city and that the city needs to take action on that, and that there are a lot of electric equipment incentives and rebates available right now, and we can kind of funnel that money into the city through some of these programs. And then as part of that survey, we also asked respondents to use this slider to kind of set where they think this city should come down as far as pushing electrification forward. 0 is kind of don't do anything, just follow what the state and what BACMed requires us to do. And then on the other side, we had electrify everything as fast as possible and don't worry about anything else. And 50 is kind of do what we can on the easy issues that lead to cost savings, explore additional policies, and we got about a 75 or 74 on that response. So I think that kind of points to maybe push ahead on these things, but be mindful of the cost impacts and the hurdles for folks doing so. So with all of that in your back pocket now, we wanted to talk through kind of our next steps. So the first phase of this project was really information gathering, understanding the building stock, understanding the costs, starting to get a sense of what direction the community wanted to take. And then from there, phase two is to start developing actual policies and strategies that the city can implement over time to make progress on these goals. So to start with that, we're here today to get some of your thoughts and some of your direction on where we should be looking. So we're not, proposing any specific actions tonight or specific strategies, but really just policy directions that have different levels of aggression, I guess, as far as how advanced we wanted to take this, and also just types of policies, whether we want to look at performance standards or ordinances or incentives. And we'll be going through these over the next couple of months. But again, likely not one of these pathways is going to hit all of your goals. It's going to be some combination of these, so keep that in mind. So on the one, I guess we've got 5 different policies that we can kind of think through and talk about tonight. The first is to just, follow the state and BOCMED requirements, continue with the current REACH codes, and then really focus on outreach and incentives to get the community up to speed, get them prepared for what's coming down the line, make sure their buildings are ready for this, they understand the requirements, and then hopefully help connect them to the tens of thousands of dollars that are available currently for each household. The second policy pathway is kind of looking at new REACH codes to encourage and or require electrification at time of renovation. So kind of expanding on the codes you already have. The third is moving towards more of a requirement of electrification upon replacement ahead of the BOCMED requirements. So getting out ahead of what kind of their minimums will be. 4 goes in kind of a different direction and really applies to larger buildings, commercial buildings, maybe large multifamily, in a building performance package where you would set a threshold of efficiency and building owners would have any approach that they wanted to take in order to get to that. And there could be that electrification would get them there easily because it is very efficient, but it opens the door to a lot of different options. And then finally, 5 is an electric first policy for city facilities. So this is really the city taking the lead on this effort, demonstrating feasibility, and then being able to show that to the community as a way to, really lead on this topic. So our project timeline and next steps, like I said, we kind of got through phase 1. We have all this data together. We're looking for some feedback tonight to start thinking about what direction we should be looking in to really expand on and develop actions around. And then through 2024, we're going to be doing more outreach and more strategy development on around that. And then in kind of 2025, bringing an actual approach and policy forward for adoption. And I'll hand it back to Andrea.
Yeah, and this is our final slide of our presentation. And with our ask tonight for council's feedback, Ryan walked us through the potential policy options, and I'll note here that they all require further legal analysis, more research, and more discussion about the cost resource allocation that would be associated with each implementation of the policy option, and further engagement. But tonight we're looking for council's early feedback because I think it's really important to contextualize for our community and for the project. What direction are we headed, and what is council's interest in each of these different policy options? You can see that they vary in the type of building that they impact, and so they have different buildings that they impact, and also like whether we're impacting just municipal facilities, more residential buildings, or commercial buildings. So there's some variance in the policy options that are before you. But with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation and open it for council feedback and questions.
Thank you very much, Ryan, and thank you, Andrea. This took a lot of my weekend, and it was a great, great staff report and study, so thank you. So let me open it up to the council for questions. Who would like to start? Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Andrea. And is it Ryan or Brian? Ryan, thank you so much. I guess I was wondering if we have done a sort of an impact and inventory analysis across the different types of buildings, and have we done any assessment in terms of how much older stock single-family homes do we have, how much older stock multifamilies, commercial buildings? For me, I'm struggling to weigh up different policy options without measuring impact clearly, and benchmarking where we are right now and where we're trying to go, and what the resource requirements would be, what the potential legal requirements and feasibility would be for these different streams. And so, do we have any information like that broken out?
We do. So at the very beginning of this project, we conducted a building segmentation analysis where we looked at how many homes there were of kind of different vintages within the city, and then also where the emissions were coming from. And I think one of the takeaways, and this has been the case in every city that we've worked on these projects, is that single family homes use a lot more gas than we would expect. I think there's this idea that large commercial, even though there's not as many of them, they're so big, they must use a lot. It's very marginal compared to how much just single family homes use throughout the city. And in general, most building stock was built, I think earlier than the mid 70s, right? So there is a lot of older building stock. I think that's where some of the panel upgrade costs and things like that start to come into play. Buildings kind of prior to the 70s tend to have smaller panels, and after that tend to be fine. So yeah, that information is around. If you have specific questions in there, I'm happy to dig in further.
Well, I guess my ask would be, when we get further down the road with this, that it's baked into the presentation, so that we can have a really comprehensive conversation about where we're pushing the needle on what different strategies. I think that, the elephant in the room is, if we could just kind of put the concerns to rest on the table here, coming from community. And so if you don't mind bringing up the slide of community concerns, and if you could just address them one by one, that would be really helpful for us to frame this conversation.
Want to start talking through grid as I share the screen again?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we hear a lot, and we heard in the survey a lot, is around grid reliability. And if we do all this electrification, what happens when the power goes out? And if we do all this electrification, is it going to cause more power outages? So we've spent a lot of time, and others have spent a lot of time working through this issue. So I guess I'll first talk about, is electrification going to cause more grid failures? And the short answer is only if we don't plan for it, and in the short term, no. So the grid today can handle quite a bit more electrification, especially building electrification. The grid is built to provide electricity to peak demand, and our peak demand happens in the summer due to cooling loads, predominantly in California. So our entire system is built to meet the 100 and something degree day in August. Building electrification tends to add demand to winter lows. So during the winter time, when you're adding heating and adding these loads that are bigger, you're mostly filling up space in the grid that is available. And in the short term, with like some amount of electrification, even with some amount of vehicle electrification, there's space to do that. If you were talking about a scenario where like I pulled a magic lever and every house and every vehicle in California was electric tomorrow, the grid could not handle that. We've got probably 20 something years between when we're supposed to have everything be electric and today. And the CEC, the utilities, the CPUC are all constantly on an annual basis modeling demand and forecasting electrification and what that's going to do to demand. And those are built into the models. So there's a lot of planning going on around grid capacity. And as long as we continue to make those upgrades and continue to build our grid out, then we shouldn't have any problems.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Because I think it's really important to be specific with the community when we're talking about how do we define short term? Because we've set a very ambitious goal, which I'm really proud of our city for doing. But when we're talking about this city and this policy and any transitions that we're making specifically, and our community is asking about grid capacity from now until 2030, what the city of San Mateo does that have any direct or negative impact on grid capacity?
So the grid is made up, there's like 3 things that could cause a grid failure, right? There's bulk generation, and that's just like, is there enough electrons flying around on the grid in order to power all the things that are asking for it? And then there's the transmission system, and that's moving electricity hundreds or thousands of miles across the country, across the state. And then there's local distribution. So if you electrified every single thing in the city, it would not do enough to cause any issues with bulk generation. And bulk generation is continually being modeled for. We've had like 1 bulk generation failure in the last like 20 years, and then one where we got like kind of close and people turned off ACs and things and we were okay. So that is really, if we have a bulk generation failure, that's on the grid manager, not the demand side. Like that shouldn't be an issue and hasn't been. Transmission, again, like the transmission lines are built with a lot of capacity in them. And at some point, when we're talking about the full state starting to electrify everything, there may be needs there to adjust, but that's like, decade out or more. And then we start to talk about local distribution systems. And that is where most of the failures that people experience on a day-to-day basis. And of those failures, most of them are due to physical damage to the grid. So like a tree fell on it or a squirrel ate through a line, which happens like way more than I would have expected. Like that is like a physical thing that happens to the grid. And that's where most of the failures happen from. And I think there's a sense, and it's logical, that like adding demand causes those failures. Like electricity is not getting to me anymore, but it's really a physical issue with the grid that causes most of the outages we all experience on a daily basis or monthly basis or whatever. There is a chance that, local impacts could happen where if everyone on a street electrified and all got EVs and all got level 2 chargers, that would cause a transformer to be upgraded locally, and there could be costs associated with that. But again, like these are all planning initiatives that are like happening ongoing. So like adding electrical demand in any one building or any like long-term, like over the course of years, demand increase is not going to cause a failure. It just is going to cause changes to the grid that need to be made.
Well, when we're giving away free EVs, like sign me up. But in terms of this policy and building electrification, am I correct in hearing you say that grid capacity for this stated goal is not a legitimate concern?
Yeah, I agree. Through 2030, I don't think it's a concern. I think through 2045 and getting to like 100%, then yes, we're gonna have to make investments in our grid.
Thank you. Were there other concerns you wanted to address?
Yeah, I think the other one on here was cost. And I think there are legitimate cost concerns. Like it does cost more to install electric appliances in the short term. And those pay off, and there are a lot of incentives around today, but I think we do want to be open to the idea that we need support at this time to get this work done, and there is a ton of support, but that's something we want to be monitoring over time. And I don't think the intent is to put anyone in a position where things are overly expensive or a burden, but we do want to be preparing for the future and taking advantage of the money that's out there. So like right now, again, you could install a heat pump hot water heater for no cost. And we want to make sure we're capturing that value as much as we can.
I wanted to add a little bit more about the concerns we heard related to costs. We heard specifically concerns from the community about costs that were passed on to renters, so those who don't own their own property. And then also the costs borne by our most vulnerable community members. And so it stated in our report about how central to our analysis and the strategy is making sure our vulnerable community members are supported in this transition. And so I realized we introduced a lot of different policy concepts, and the next step would take it further to show how they're going to be supported throughout each policy option if implemented.
Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could actually take a 5-minute break right now, we'll come right back. Okay? Thank you. Okay, everyone, we're going to come back now. And I've got a question for my fellow council members. Given the fact that this is a very in-depth topic and people are very interested, and the fact that it is 20 after 6, and we have to move on at 7, and we have 10 people out with a public comment, I'm wondering if maybe we want to pause on the questions, allow the public to give public comment, and then come back with the questions as an option to try and let the public have their say and not have to, because the alternative is everyone would have to wait until the end of our regular meeting to have public comment. What do you think, Councilmember Lund? Are you okay? Are you okay? All right. So, all right, we're going to have a slight change in plan. So,
And I just want to remind council members, even when responding to a question, we do need you on microphone.
yep. Thank you. All right. So we have, is it 10?
Our number of public commenters has increased. So if you are in chambers and you wish to speak on this item, please deliver a yellow request to speak slip as your earliest opportunity. If you're in Zoom, please raise your hand. Madam Mayor, at this moment, we have a total of 17 requests to speak. So we look to the council.
So 1 minute? 2 minutes?
We've just increased to 20.
Okay, I think 1 minute.
1 minute per speaker?
1 minute public comment.
Okay.
All right, so thank you very much.
All righty. So first in chamber, I'd like to call up Sam Fishman, followed by Terry Whitehair and Gerard Manning.
Hello, Council. I really appreciate a chance to speak here today, and I really thank the City Council of San Mateo for taking up this very important issue. My name is Sam Fishman. I'm with the San Francisco Bay Area Urban Planning and Research Association. We do a lot of work all around the Bay Area, researching and working on building decarbonization issues. We strongly support robust measures presented in this presentation to decarbonize buildings. It's both gas appliances produce really negative health effects for communities. It's often disproportionately affecting lower income and disadvantaged communities. That's one thing we like to highlight. This isn't just a climate issue. It is a health issue. It is an equity issue. And San Mateo is really uniquely positioned with cheap energy from the Peninsula Clean Energy and the potential resources available to this community to begin the decarbonization process faster in an equitable way. And it's going to be up to cities like San Mateo to do that before the back-mid rules come into place in an equitable way. So there's a real chance to take leadership on this issue, and I look forward to seeing what the City Council does and to supporting them in ways that we can. Thank you.
Thank you. And to the audience, our last remote speaker on this item will be Jordan Grimes. The next speaker is Terry Whitehair, followed by Gerard Manning and Robert Whitehair.
Thank you. I appreciate the time to talk, and I thank the council for taking up this very important issue and being a leader that you are in sustainability. I feel very proud to be a San Mateo resident of over 40 years, and what I would say from the presentation and what we know is, Robert and I have electrified our whole home, which is over 40 years old. And our energy bill is zero. They've turned off the gas from our home. And I would say we're not asking for people to do it right now. We're asking to take the most important impact and require people, when their appliances fail, replace them with electricity. And so it will happen over time, and it will make a great difference in our community, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gerard Manning, followed by Robert Whitehair and Rick Bonilla.
Good evening. Our climate crisis is not just about CO2. It's about human behavior and our inability to act in the face of a massive problem that isn't just happening today. So I'm asking you tonight for true leadership. Don't just try and make a policy that balances one resident against another. Please look to the future and see what's really coming at us. My kids, by the time they're my age, they'll be facing a world racked by crop failures, mass migration, tens of millions of deaths, by entire countries unlivable because of heat. That's what we're facing. In San Mateo, what's it got to do with us? Well, We're one of the richest areas of the country. We emit twice as much CO2 per person as anybody else, as an average human. And we have a wonderful opportunity here because of our abilities to lead the way, as you have done in past iterations of this council. Let me give you one thing. Jumps out from the report. You can get a free water heater tomorrow. Yet, over 99% of the water heaters in San Mateo that were swapped out last year went to gas. And it's not changing very much in the past month. That amount, the amount we're committing in 1 year of water heaters in gas, sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Robert Whitehair, followed by Rick Bonilla and Lori Watanuki.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. You can continue your climate leadership, take bold action, and enact the objective established policies to decarbonize existing buildings and infrastructure and eliminate methane gas by 2030 by adopting the 5 policy options that are in your report, with some exceptions. On the first one, I suggest you add including smoothing the path for accelerated building permit processes. One of the things that's going to happen with Bay Area Air Quality Management District, they want to be sure that cities can handle electrification. By your smoothing the path to make that happen, we'll make that even more possible. I'm asking to adopt new REACH codes, require electrification at the time of renovation, require electric equipment upon replacement ahead of the BACMed zero NOx requirements, demonstrating to BACMed the city's commitment to the elimination of gas by 2020, establish building performance standards, which I think is a really good thing, and adopt an electric first policy for city facilities, including capital funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Rick Bonilla, followed by Lori Watanuki and Michael Reagan.
Thank all of you, Mayor and council members. I think that thing's running fast, if you could check it. Anyway, I got to get down to business because I got a lot to say. First, I'm going to twist a famous quote. Ordinary measures are okay in ordinary times. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures, and these are extraordinary times. We're living through climate changes and climate challenges that we've never seen before, the human people. Okay, so we need to be careful what we do. We've already set a good, firm course as a city of San Mateo, and I've been working since 2014 to make that happen. That's when I and John Ebnetter, planning commissioner, started talking with people at the county to get PCE started. We have a concierge service that they're working on. That concierge service is what people who live in San Mateo who don't know what to do will be able to call and find out. Can you help me? Where do I get all the incentives? And where do I get all the help? What do I do? So I would recommend that we do that. Okay, we steer people with our quite apt staff towards what they can do. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker is Lori Watanuki.
Good evening, Mayor Diaz-Nash and members of the City Council. My name is Lori Watanuki. When looking at the projected timeline of 2025 for adoption, I think this is a very high bar for residents and property owners. The cost factor itself is quite a bit for property owners. Many homeowners will have to replace a service panel, and this is for the transition of going from 100 amps to 200 amps. And there's a shortage of qualified electricians who even want to do this kind of work of replacements in this area. This needs to be taken into consideration. I do support sustainability, but this electrification policy needs to be phased in for residents and property owners. Thank you.
Thank you. And for our last speaker in-house, I believe it is Celeste.
Hi, I'm Celeste. I'm with Coldwell Banker Real Estate, so I sell a lot of houses in this area in San Mateo. And after listening to you, one important factor in this electrifying is the cost. And so what I'm finding with the houses is the 1,900 houses on 5th and Grant versus, San Mateo Park. Those folks most of them can afford to upgrade it. Some of the houses can't be upgraded to 200 amp. So it's not 2,000, 3,000, it's up there, 30,000 to dig through. So just have that cost. I think the cost is the biggest deal. And everybody wants to do this, but some incentive, maybe the city gives them, it has to be more incentives to really get there, because people want to do it. They just can't. And what happens if they can't? If you can't upgrade that panel to 200, what do you do? That's got to be a question, because I just ran into that. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you. Moving to our Zoom commenters, our next speaker will be Brian Schmidt. Brian, please unmute your mic.
Good evening, Brian Schmidt here. I'm the Executive Director for Menlo Spark, working to help the City of Menlo Park achieve climate neutrality and working for the region as a whole. We are wrestling with the litigation that happened in the Ninth Circuit over Berkeley and looking at the policy objectives that were laid out in the slides today. I can see ways that the City of San Mateo can achieve certain solutions to those issues, particularly policy objectives 2, 3, and 4 for electrification at renovation using NOx requirements and building performance standards. I think the city should pursue all 3 of those, particularly for policy number 2 that could look into using a NOx standard for electrification at time of renovation. And the cities are all working together on this. I think the action by the City of San Mateo will encourage the City of Menlo Park and your other fellow cities across the region. So I strongly encourage you in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Our next speaker will be Tom Kabat. Tom, please unmute your mic.
Thank you. I'm Tom Cabot. I am a Menlo Park resident, but a citizen volunteer on the Air District's implementation working group for those zero NOx appliance rules. I want to commend the council and staff for making these moves towards decarbonizing the city of San Mateo. That's great stuff. I thought I'd recommend a 6th action area to look at in conjunction with the 5 policy areas. The action area would be something that San Mateo could pursue internally without needing much public input on, and it would be just to take all actions within their abilities to smooth the path towards easy replacement when items burn out, like when the water heaters burn out, in preparing for the 2027 zero NOx rule that is meant to save many lives in the Bay Area. So working on that, smoothing the path, as Robert Whitehead mentioned. Thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Dave Clark. Dave, please unmute your mic.
Thank you, Ryan and Andrea, for the presentation. My question is, are we creating a 1.5 degree, a 1.7, or a 2 degree strategic plan? I have a bad flu, or I would be there in person. I'm the chair of Heat Pump Advocates San Mateo, a group of 150 members that have studied this over the past month. The first thing is the enormity of this. This is $600 million over the course of 25 years. The second takeaway is that I think we need to hire a sustainability director. We don't want this to be another leaf blower initiative, and we will produce a report in the next week. We submitted some information in the past and didn't get any feedback, and I hope we can close that circle down, but we'll submit a short report of our thoughts, and that possibly will lend some ideas to this in the next week. The third point is EOF 2030 is scaring everybody. There's a lot of bad information about their cost and when they have to do this, and as Ryan pointed out, and we're looking at 2045, just like Half Moon Bay. The next point is that we need to bring the stakeholders together and add more dimensions to the strategy. Let's please look at the Marin County Grand Jury report, which brought the stakeholders together, like architects, real estate, government, contractors.
Thank you, Dave. Our next speaker will be Glenn. Glenn, please unmute your mic.
Hi there, Glenn Tenney, longtime San Mateo resident. I have 3 quick points. One, you mentioned that the grid impact would be primarily in winter. I think that's not correct, because those of us shifting from gas to electric heat pumps will now suddenly have air conditioning where we didn't before. Number 2, there's no mention of forced replacement, only on replacement going to electrification. And number 3, for those of us senior citizens in our 70s, we will need assistance if, as the other person mentioned, the realtor mentioned, having to replace our panel is a huge task to go from 100 amp to 200 amp, or even just replacing the water heater. Those are my 3 points, and I would appreciate it. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Andrew. Andrew, please unmute your mic.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Andrew Ludomirski. I have 3 hopefully very quick comments about this. They're practical comments. One is, many of these come from having recently remodeled my own house. One is that while putting in a heat pump water heater sounds nice, there are a number of houses that have tankless water heaters where a heat pump water heater physically will not fit in the space. And I'm hoping that some kind of plan can be found to enable these houses to somehow comply with the new rules. At least that will be considered in the analysis. A second issue is the report talked about the cost of energy. And I did the calculation a few years ago when it was indeed the case that a heat pump was less expensive to operate than a gas heater. Unfortunately, the PG&E rates, and as far as I can tell, this is true even with Peninsula Clean Energy rates for electricity, have been increasing extremely quickly. So I'm hoping that more details can be shared with what rate schedules were used for these calculations and to see if anything can be done to enable customers to purchase electricity at comparable rates.
Thank you, Andrew. Your time is up. Nolan, you may unmute your mic.
Thank you for having me speak. My name is Nolan Sarmiento. I reside in San Mateo County, and I am a member of the San Mateo Youth Climate Action, a youth-led nonprofit. So I commend you for listening to decarbonization policy. I am really in favor of option 2 and 3, reaching new codes to encourage and require electrification or require electric equipment upon replacement. I think I strongly urge these 2 because I'm worried for the future of my generation, future generations, and public health. Has been proven that exposure to greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane gas, nitrous oxide, leads to development of memory loss, depression, cardiovascular issues, and even cancer, as well as the effects of climate change building up over time. It will lead to more impactful storms, disasters, as well as reaching a deadlier global temperature. So please don't fail the youth. We are tired of the mistakes being repeated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nolan. Our next speaker will be Michelle Hudson. Michelle, please unmute your mic.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for your work on advancing building electrification in San Mateo. Your efforts are necessary to combat the climate crisis and ensure a healthy and safe future for the community. I urge you to be as ambitious as possible in the policy options that you pursue for building electrification so the city can be positioned to meet the original decarbonization objective, eliminate methane gas use by 2030. Please adopt the most aggressive options, including option 3, require electric upon replacement ahead of BOCMED zero NOx requirements. In addition, I urge the city to make same-day building permits for electric equipment replacements available and waive permit fees for electric replacements. Finally, based on some of the comments I've heard this evening, I urge the city to educate residents on the Watt diet, as most homes can avoid panel upgrades. The timing for bold electrification efforts has never been better with the many funding sources available in the city's great partnership with PG&E. Please rise to the occasion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Michael Weinhauer. Michael, please unmute your mic.
Good evening, Mayor Diaz-Nash, members of the council. Thanks for listening to me tonight. I think we really need to take a more common sense approach here and move more towards the middle of that spectrum there. And our approach should be more carrot than stick. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District goals are already very aggressive, and California is already always very aggressive in their timelines. We should not be trying to exceed that. And I think you all know it, most of you, at least in your heart of hearts, like that doing this by like 2025 or 2027 it's too aggressive, and it is going to cost impact a lot of people. I own one of those houses that are 100 years old, and I know for a fact my grid will cost, my panel will cost a lot more to upgrade. I also hope that you're listening to San Mateo residents. There are a lot of people outside San Mateo. There are a lot of people here. Mr. Moody has like 5 submissions for the packet. So I hope there's not double counting going on and twisting the results of these things, and you're mindful of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Rick Bollard. Rick, please unmute your mic.
Hello, Council. I'm here as a resident of San Mateo. Climate change is the existential crisis for a lifetime, so given our responsibility to take action, I thank you for the time and attention you've been giving to electrification policy. And I urge you to move forward on decarbonization and electrification measures for our city. My core point is that we need to stop replacing aged-out gas appliances with new gas appliances, which continue to burn fossil fuels. The ideal time to electrify existing homes is when appliances fail and require replacement. So we can't afford to miss that opportunity. Fundamentally, every brand new gas appliance installed will burn fossil fuel until 2035, 2040, 2045, much longer than we can afford. So we can't keep installing new gas appliances. We have the economic incentives, we have the technology, so it's up to us as a city to follow through with policy, community outreach, communication, and support. Bottom line, action is critical. Climate change is here. We can't afford to wait, so thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be user SMYCA. Please unmute your mic.
Hi, sorry about the naming conventions, but my name is Jaden Wan. I'm a student at San Mateo County Schools, and I'm a proponent of building electrification, and I represent the youth-led nonprofit San Mateo Youth Climate Action. I thank the mayor and council for their strong leadership throughout the years in this initiative, and after reading the Sustainable Building Strategy project update, I'm in favor of requiring electric replacements to our gradually failing gas appliances due to their impact and action towards a less fossil fuel dependent society. I'm a student, so I don't have firsthand experience owning a home or paying the bills. So I think that, well, I'm concerned about the state of the world and the state of our cities, really. Change starts locally, even though we're thinking globally. And I think that the action that we make in a day can influence the years to come. I urge the council to adopt strong electrification policy options and promote social and economic equity when possible, making good on their president-setting progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Brett Anderson. Brett, please unmute your mic.
Yes, hi, Brett Anderson. I am a resident of Palo Alto. I wanted to talk about an example in Palo Alto to demonstrate how these electrification measures are becoming more feasible and should be over the next few years. In Palo Alto, I just watched a neighbor get an installation of a heat pump water heater. It was a one-day affair, and it plugged right into the 110 outlet that was near his washing machine. And it'll probably cost him $700 after rebates. These are late model 50-gallon, 110-volt water heaters. So the products are coming on the market. The supply is there. And this was installed by the Palo Alto utilities. So they have a direct installation program, which is currently being developed at PCE as well and SVCE. And these programs take all the complexity and availability and feasibility issues away from the consumer. So it's a one-stop shop. You call your utility, you get it installed, and they take care of it.
Thank you. And through the mayor, our last two speakers on this item, as mentioned earlier, are Lisa Van de Voorde and Jordan Grimes. Lisa, please unmute your mic.
Good evening. Ignored throughout the entire presentation tonight is that the City of Berkeley's decision to electrify has been overturned by the state Supreme Court. Maybe it would be more prudent to take a wait-and-see approach until that gets sorted out. And tonight's report says that over 120 written public comments were submitted for the item, with the majority in support of decarbonization. But how are we to believe that when those comments are not attached to the report submitted to the council tonight? And what kind of analysis was done on those comments? How many were for and how many were against? And how many were duplicates with one person writing in several times, as someone mentioned earlier? Because when you take out the duplicates on attachment 4, twice as many people are against electrification as for it. Most residents do not support electrification of existing buildings. In the report tonight, it says that the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commissioner's top concern was a robust engagement and outreach approach to make sure all voices in the community were heard. My question to you tonight is how many voices in the community are not just being heard, but are actually being listened to?
Thank you.
Urge council to select policy option 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And our final speaker on this item will be Jordan Grimes. Jordan, please unmute your mic.
Good evening, Council. Jordan Grimes, lifelong San Mateo resident, although I would note that the climate crisis affects us all. I want to encourage the Council to pursue the entire slate of decarb policy recommendations provided by staff, especially the renovation provisions, replacements, and zero NOx requirements. The state of the climate crisis requires action on a greater scale than what we've attempted in the past. We've heard discussion about the cost of action, but I'd like to talk about the cost of inaction to both public and private health. They are much higher than the alternative and must be taken into account. We do need a robust community education program to help people understand why we're electrifying, how to do it, and the cheapest way to do so, but we need to move forward. We saw the recent flooding measure that residents of our city understand the importance and benefit of uniting to solve complex problems. In that spirit, let's move forward together toward a healthier, cleaner future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, that concludes public comment.
All right, thank you very much. I will be closing public comment and bringing it back to the council to continue our questions. Thank you, everyone, for going out of turn. We appreciate it. Who would like to be the next person? Councilmember Hedges.
Why don't you put up the screen again with the questions? I've got them written down, but they're not exactly what was in the report. That's not it. That's it, thank you. So, number one, I think that's fine. I would do this. I've lived in an all-electric home since 1979.
Councilmember Hedges, we're doing questions right now. We're not.
I'm sorry, I thought they were asking how I felt on this.
No.
Okay. Then, my question is, how did you actually arise these costs? Because I'm in some disagreement with them from personal knowledge of what it's costing in my development. I noticed that you had said that you had taken out some of the outliers in costs, so it's not a true average.
Yeah, so these costs all came from the utilities or from rebate providers. So they're from actual projects that were done throughout San Mateo County.
But what about the phrase that was in the report that some of the outliers were not included in these numbers?
In some of the incentive programs, the data is filled out by contractors, and sometimes we would get costs that would like double count two different projects. So if they did like a water heater and an HVAC, those costs would be combined potentially, or if they did insulation at the same time, those costs would be combined. So if there were some like super high or super low numbers, we got rid of those and kind of honed in on the range that we thought was applicable to like the actual work being done.
I'm trying to understand, because does it make a difference if they put, what I understand you saying, if they did two different projects at once and put it in, does it make a difference?
They would count the total cost of that project twice.
Oh, I see.
So it would make it look like it was a, $70,000 project or something, but really they had done a whole home rebate or retrofit, and we were looking at just one appliance. So there was some of that, but I can't think of any. There weren't very many things that we pulled out, and we also pulled this from multiple different data sets. So there was like large rebate databases, and then there's also some case studies that were done. And I know some of the outliers we took out were actually really low estimates, so it kind of was on both sides, just a kind of standard data cleaning process.
I'm not trying to cross-examine you, I just know what the costs have been where I live.
Yeah.
And it is old technology we're replacing that's already electric.
Yeah, I think where we're seeing kind of the most variability in costs are on the space heating side. So HVAC, we'll see one of the case studies, or a few of the case studies that were done, got 5 or 6 quotes for the same building, the same appliances, and there'd be over a $10,000 range just for those. So I think some of the issue that we're seeing early on is that contractors, if they don't know a particular technology, instead of saying, no, I'm not going to do this, they just give you a really high price, and that way they either make a bunch of money or they don't have to do the work. So I think we see a lot of variability there. And then the other place, which has been brought up a lot, is the service upgrade. So upgrading a panel is relatively straightforward. if a service is undergrounded or has to go through like multiple different properties and you need a right of way, there are scenarios where that could be really expensive. And I think that there's room for either earmarking specific support for those or allowing exemptions if there is like, you know, a significant infrastructure issue. I personally have a over 100-year-old home, and we did a panel upgrade, and the service didn't cost me anything because there's a $3,000 earmark. So I was able to do that for no cost. But I live close to the street, and I have above ground wire. So that one can be really variable. It could be almost no cost, or it could be high in like very specific circumstances.
Yeah, the reason I ask, from my knowledge, and I know most of the permits in our neighborhood, it's running between 30 and 90,000, depending on how elaborate it is.
For which work?
For HVAC system for heating and cooling.
I just got done looking at several thousand data points for Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and that's not that's well out of the range of what we're finding.
I just toured one house about 2 months ago that spent 90,000.
They could have spent 90,000, but we just looked at all of the tech data that has been done in the 9 county Bay Areas for the Bay Area Air Quality Management District project. And our average cost and median cost was around 20,000 for HVAC.
This is a public data set that we can provide
Correct.
if you would like to see it.
Sure. That's it for right now.
Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Lorraine.
Thank you. I appreciate the previous council questions. I'll just throw in one. Andrea, can you give us a sense of, well, firstly, I want to thank Ryan and Andrea. In our report, we saw a numeration or quantification of one of the goals that we already have in our climate action plan related to electrification, specifically noting that we already have in our city a goal that equates to approximately replacing 14,840 water heaters and 9,890 furnaces by 2030. So I was hoping you could help give us a sense of about where we are on that to date and what the options before us could do to contribute to meeting those goals.
I can start and have you add. Yeah, we have ambitious goals in our climate action plan, and these numbers really take into account the BACMID rules that require in 2027 electric water heaters and in 2029 electric heating systems. And it also takes into account our ambitious work in adopting REACH codes that impact existing buildings. And as Ryan mentioned, as he kind of framed our discussion for today, electrifying existing buildings and new construction is a huge driver of greenhouse gas emission reductions in our community. So this is a really important area of work. And so exploring, all policy options is pretty important to advance our climate goals.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think starting to phase out those appliances on burnout, right? Like there's a set number of appliances that burn out every year. And I didn't do those calculations for the climate action plan, but I think they roughly align with the BACMED results. But that assumes that every appliance that burns out is getting replaced. And we know with like permit compliance and things like that, there can be a little bit of flux in there. So I think, technically if everything was perfect, then yes, with like the BACMED and your current requirements, you may be able to hit those targets. But I think without some additional effort in that area, it's going to be a tough one to ensure that you can meet by 2030, if that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. No further questions.
Okay, Councilmember Newsom.
First off, thanks for a great presentation. I'll try to be quick. Did I hear you right that you said some incentives would require the household to be fully electric vehicles before being able to qualify, or did I mishear what you said.
No, I was saying that if you do have an electric vehicle or a heat pump, water heater, or HVAC, then you can change your utility rate to the electric preferred rate or the electric rate, electrified rate, not the electric rate. Then that'll help you ensure that you're getting savings after electrification. So you don't have to have an electric vehicle. It's just one way that you could qualify for this more cost-effective rate.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for clarifying. Do we have any idea of the number or a rough percentage of houses in the city of San Mateo that currently are 100% electric, like the White Hares?
I'm so sorry. That data is so hard to grab. We started tracking with REACH code implementation on new construction, but I don't have great data. When we did our existing building analysis, we know that there is a lot of existing gas equipment out there.
Right. But it should be something we can figure out, right? Because there should be a certain amount of homes that don't have a PG&E, a gas bill from PG&E, right?
There is extensive privacy protections in place for utility data. So it's, yes, like I'm sure PG&E knows, but it's not something that they're likely to tell us.
One other, well, I've got a few more. You mentioned that gas and electric, if we can get off gas, the rates will come down faster. But do we know that to be true? Because and again, just my perception of it is that electric bills are going up just as fast, if not faster than gas. So do you have any data points on that?
Yeah, so the issue around both gas and electricity bill rates are just going to go up. Like we know that. We can look in the past, and things are they get more expensive. We all know that, who pay energy bills. The projection over the long term, and it is challenging because PG&E has just increased their rates. They're restructuring rates. There's going to be potentially a flat fee to pay for folks based on household income, to pay for infrastructure. So there's a lot going on right now with rates. I think over the long term, what is expected and what's been modeled at the state level by the utilities, there's a really awesome report called GridWorks. Most of the cost of gas infrastructure is paid for on a per therm basis, right? So I think 75% or something like that of the cost of a therm of gas is just the infrastructure cost. So as buildings are becoming more efficient, even without electrification, the number of therms of gas we're buying is decreasing and has been decreasing. And with all this electrification work happening, it's decreasing even faster. So that means in order to pay for all that gas infrastructure, every therm that we buy has to increase. So the projections from those utility partners and this GridWorks report, which was done by E3, which is an energy and economics firm, projects like a 400% to 600% increase in gas rates over the next 50 years. So this is, I think the difference between the rates today and tomorrow, especially with gas, fluctuate month to month, depending on the market. So it's really hard to nail down the today thing because those rates are changing so much. But looking at a more zoomed out approach of the next decade or so, that's where we expect to see this increasing in both, but a diversion with a higher rate increase from gas.
Right, okay. I've lived in San Mateo way longer than I care to admit, but I have, I don't deny that climate change is real. And, when I can tell you, growing up here in the 80s and 90s, because I actually feel really old, that, no homes when I was a kid had air conditioning. It wasn't a thing. And now we're seeing more and more that people are adding. But it did kind of leave me wondering, is that stat you said that the rates are highest in the midst of summer based on a state number or a state demographic? Because I don't think we, again, with privacy, have any idea what percentage of people have air conditioning in San Mateo, but I would guess that it's probably still not more than a third, but just spitballing it.
You're actually really close. It's high 20% is the number that we've been running with for current AC. But because So yes, that summer-driven peak load it's a statewide thing, and the grid is partly a statewide issue, right? We talked about those like 3 pieces of the grid. So if the Central Valley is suffering, over 100 degrees, everyone has their AC on. That's still sapping power that we're all sharing essentially. So it kind of doesn't matter like that local impact so much. It's like it is like the full grid impact. And heating, because heating traditionally has been gas, not electric, you still, even with that low usage of AC, we still see our summer peaks generally up for electric be in the summertime.
All right. Any ideas, stats, as far as what percentage of homes have 100 amp service versus 200, or is that the same sort of a limitation that we don't?
Yeah, so I think, I know, I can't say for the city exactly. I will say that it originally was thought to be really challenging to electrify a single family home on 100 amps. That doesn't seem to be the case. Watt diode approaches, smart panels, smart circuits, EVs are really what is driving the need for a bigger panel. It's not so much the building electrification. And if you can have a smart circuit where like, if your, heater and your induction stove and your dryer's on, then your EV turns down or turns off as charging.
Right.
That can avoid the panel upgrade. So 100 amps should be fine on like, a 2,000 square foot house. I think we did an analysis and, or E3 did an analysis lately, and they found that like 44% of houses in the Bay Area have a 200 amp panel. So there's probably another handful of percentage, probably 20, 30% that have at least 100 amp. I know my home in the East Bay had a 70 amp on a duplex, so that was not enough. But yeah, most houses should have 100.
The last thing that I've heard about, but I was wondering if there's been any movement on, is like a water heater loan program.
Yeah.
So, what happens quite frequently is someone who has had a gas water heater forever has their gas water heater go out, and they don't have time to wait for permits, so they end up just putting back in. Do we have anything in the works to move programs forward like that?
Yeah, there's a few pilots right now going on for emergency replacements of water heaters. There's 2 options. You can do a gas drop-in as an emergency, but there's also new 120 amp hot water heaters that some of the callers talked about, where you can just plug it into a general wall outlet, 15 amp circuit, and that can work really well. Even in like some homes that might kind of want more heat than that, like, lots of people in the house, really big house. It's great for like a pinch to get you through permitting. And I think another point that probably should have been on the slide is looking at permitting and having those same day permits for all electric. A lot of cities do have them. I don't know, maybe Andrea, if you know about San Mateo's requirements, but that's an option a lot of cities have put in place to help streamline that. It's just a same day online permit, co-inspectors, so you just get one inspector later on. And that's one of the ways that we can look at streamlining that and make it easier.
Thank you. I apologize for so many questions, but thank you for your answers.
Thank you. I think we are going to have to continue the meeting here. Yeah, because it's now after 7 o'clock and we have many people here to celebrate and raise concerns about other issues. So do I need to make a motion? Someone make a motion, or do we just continue?
You can just announce to the audience that we'll be coming back for more feedback at the end of this regular meeting.
Okay, great. As our city clerk said, we will be coming back at the end of the regular meeting to finish our question period and then move into discussion, because we already have had our public comment on sustainable building strategy. So thank you. Thank you very much. We'll see you in a little bit. And with that, I will close the special meeting and let's move on over. Oh, you need 10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes. Everyone be comfortable. We will get going as quickly as we can. Thank you.